All right, in this part of the videos, I want to talk a little bit about your sensory receptors. And I'm going to start to differentiate between sensation and perception. Sensation is what your body can do. You can sense stimuli in the environment. And that's why you need sensory receptors, because all of your senses are detecting something in the environment. And so you need some specialized cell, in this case receptors, that detect that part of the environment. And I'm going to start with smell and taste. Now, um, in both your nose and your tongue, you have what we call chemoreceptors. Chemo as in chemical. Okay. So when you smell something, when you taste something, what you are detecting in the environment are different chemicals. Now, in the case of your nose, um, those are chemicals that happen to be in the air. So we're talking about perfume or somebody's body odor, um, or we're talking about, a cake in the oven. Some chemical is being released into the environment. That chemical eventually gets into your nose. It gets stuck in your mucus lining, and the chemoreceptors in your nose then detect that chemical from there. Now, humans, in fact, have a pretty decent sense of smell. For example, if I gave you a sweaty t-shirt with your best friend's sweat, or your brother's sweat, or your sister's sweat, or your boyfriend or girlfriend's sweat, or just a stranger, there's a good chance that you're going to be able to separate those, to be able to say, oh, this is my brother's shirt, or this is my best friend's shirt, or this is my girlfriend's shirt. Now, there is a problem with our nose. Is one of the reasons why in the animal world, we seem to not have the best sense of smell, even though technically it is pretty good. And that is where our nose is located. Our nose is located, obviously, on our faces. And so there's a problem with that. Chemicals are matter. And eventually, yeah, they linger in the air, but eventually they're going to be pulled down to the ground. And so once they get below our noses, then all of a sudden we can't smell that anymore. Even dogs who have superior sense of smell have to stick their nose right to the ground and sort of breathe in and out to get smells that are sort of hidden in the ground. Now, in our tongues, we still have chemoreceptors. You're still detecting chemicals, but now what you're detecting is uh, chemicals in the foods that you're eating. When you're doing your packet, I'm often going to be asking you to differentiate what did the person sense and what did the person perceive. Well, when we're talking about smell and taste, the person sensed a chemical in the air, but their brain perceived it as smell or taste. Okay? You might say chicken or strawberries. That is the perception. But in either case, the sensation is the separate chemicals. In your vision, same thing. You have to sense something in the environment. Right now, you're looking at something in front of you, um, the computer screen, or a light, or a TV, or a pencil, or maybe you're driving a car in front of you. Well, how is it possible that you are sensing, detecting something that is feet away from you, maybe even tens of feet or even hundreds of feet sometime away from you? How can you detect that without being close to it? Well, specifically, what you're detecting is light. The light in the environment is hitting that specific item, the thing that you're looking at, And that thing that you're looking at is going to absorb some of the light. For example, let's say you're looking at strawberries. Well, those strawberries are absorbing some of the light, and they are sort of rejecting or reflecting the red light. And so because they do not absorb red light, the red light bounces off of them, and that red light gets to your eye, and then your eye senses it, and then your brain perceives that by drawing that picture of that strawberry as red. Now you have two different types of photoreceptors in your eyes. You have what we call rods and cones. Rods detect just the amount of light. If there is a lot of light, if it's bright, or if it is very dim light. Uh, Now, that gives you a good grayscale. There are animals who only see in grayscale. They're not the ones you think, um, quite possibly. Stingrays see only in grayscale. Why? Because they have rods, but they don't have cones. And cones are the receptors that allow you to detect the hue, the color of the light. And specifically, right, your brain draws in a color, that's perception, but your cones detect the wavelength of the light. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But in detecting the wavelength of the light, it detects the color of it. Um, Now, in your ear, you have two organs, or really one organ that does two separate things. Um, so uh, when you think about your ear, you often think about your outer ear, but in your inner ear, you have a cochlea, and your cochlea has hair cells. Um, and these aren't hair cells like on your head that create, hair. They're just called hair cells because they have these hairs on the outside. Um, and these hair cells in the cochlea detect sound waves, that is, vibrations in the air. And in your cochlea, that information is sent to your brain, and your brain perceives that as sound. But in your semicircular canals, which is another part of your inner ear, it's still hair cells there, but what they detect is the orientation of your head. So if you're that guy up there doing cartwheels, your head can know that, your brain can know that your head is upside down or sideways or right side up because of the shift in the liquid in the semicircular canals, and it is detected by those hair cells. Again, when you're doing your packet and I ask you, what do your hair cells detect? Well, it depends. If the hair cells happen to be in the cochlea, they detect uh, sound waves. But if those hair cells are in the semicircular canals, what they sense is the movement of your head, the orientation of your head. What do they help you perceive? What does your brain perceive that as? Well, your brain could perceive that as sound, or it can perceive it as balance. Your semicircular canals, and the hair cells in your semicircular canals help you to feel balance by keeping track of the orientation of your head. Now, the sensation of touch is actually a few different senses. When you were in kindergarten, they talked about touch. They talked about it as it being one thing, but in fact, touch is a few things that come together. Um, the one that is most obvious, although not necessarily easy to understand, are the mechanoreceptors in your skin and body that detect pressure. When you touch a table and you feel that the table is hard, that the table is solid, maybe even that it's heavy. Those are mechanoreceptors that detect pressure against your skin. If you stick your hand in your pocket and without looking, you can tell that you have a quarter in your pocket or that you have your keys or a pen drive. Just by feeling it, you know that it's there and you know what it is. These are mechanoreceptors. Your In your hands, you have these mechanoreceptors that feel pressure. That information is sent to your brain, specifically to your somatosensory cortex. And your somatosensory cortex then figures out what it is you're touching. It allows you to sort of paint a picture, if you will, of the thing that you are touching. But that's not the only thing that's in your hand. When you touch that table, you might feel that that table is hot or cold. When you touch a cup of water or a cup of coffee, when you put that to your mouth, you can also feel that they are hot and cold. And these are what we call thermoreceptors. And that's not just one, there's two different types there as well. You have thermoreceptors for hot and thermoreceptors for cold. And then you have free nerve endings. If you get cut or if a needle is pressed against your skin, it might hit a free nerve ending. And that free nerve ending is going to send information to your brain, and your brain is going to perceive it as pain. And again, even this is not just one. There are different types of pain receptors, that is, free nerve endings. Some of them detect sharp pain, a sharp pain like a cut, versus a dull pain like the pressure that you might feel if someone squeezes your hand. What's interesting about the free nerve endings is that they can kind of block each other. This is why if you cut yourself, one of the first things you do to stop the pain is you press or you put pressure on it. In putting pressure on it, the dull pain masks the sharp pain. And so you're able to sort of, think about whatever you got to do a little bit better because the sharp pain isn't making you feel overwhelmed. Also, an itch is a sharp pain. And so what do you do when you itch? You put a dull pain on top of it. You scratch. And while you're scratching, the dull pain masks the sharp pain, the itch.